You're listening to the Magnetic Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Alessandra Martin, intuitive brand designer for spiritual entrepreneurs. The Magnetic Boss Podcast is where visionaries come together to openly share wisdom and authentic conversations. I know that you are ready to leave your legacy in the world and become sought out in your industry. I also know that you are sick and tired of getting overlooked. You're ready to have a magnetic business. I'm here to help you create your magnetic brand. It's my mission to help you show up confidently with a professional, irresistible online presence. If you're in this for the long game and all in on the big vision you have for your business, let's dive in. Alessandra Pollina is the founder of Quotable Media Co, a PR and media agency which works to elevate women-led brands and produces Quotable, a female entrepreneur podcast and Quotable magazine. She also hosts PR workshops and educational programs for small business owners and runs the Female Founders of Boston networking group. Alessandra sits on the board of the Massachusetts chapter of the National Organization for Women and was awarded the 40 Under 40 from Boston Business Journal in 2022. She's based in Boston, where she lives with her husband and 9-year-old son, and you can find her at quotablemediaco.com.
Alessandra, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about our conversation. I would love to have you give yourself a quick introduction outside of your bio and tell us a little bit about your story and your journey.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get to chat with you today. So I have run a PR agency and media company for a long time. I started the PR agency more than 12 years ago now, actually. It wasn't an agency back then. It was, that's like when I first started working with my first client as just like me doing PR for a client, and then built it into a small agency over the many, many years since then. And then more recently, I had started a podcast about between 5 and 6 years ago now, probably. And so that's kind of the media, like when I kind of got into actually like creating our own media platforms. And then we actually started publishing a magazine a couple years after that. So now we have like those owned platforms as well. It's a quarterly print magazine and online, and then the podcast, and that's kind of like the media side of things. And then we still do totally done for you PR services for our clients on the agency side. So that's kind of the overview of what it is. And I mean the journey, I don't know, it depends how much you want me to like go into that. Like we can totally go there or
Yeah, let's go there. I think that for our listeners, it's always helpful to know kind of where that starting point was and how the growth journey went, because one, there's so many overlaps in all of our stories, and two, I think that there's usually some like juicy takeaways from that.
Yeah. I feel like I had a sort of unusual journey just in terms of how I started. I like had never expected to be, I had never thought about being a business owner, to be honest. Like I tell people
Yeah.
I didn't even like realize that I owned a business for like a while. Like I never thought about it that way. I wasn't like I feel like these days people are like, "Oh, I'm starting a business," and they just put up a website or like start an Instagram account and they're like, "Here's my business." And they don't even have like any clients yet or like anything like that sometimes. And I was the opposite. I was like working with clients for like a while. And then I was like kind of like, "Oh wait, this is like I have like a whole business. Like I should put together like a website and like try to proactively bring on more clients and stuff like that." But I started so kind of like slowly and naturally, sort of. What happened was when I first graduated college, and people always ask me this, I studied PR in college. Like I'm actually one of those rare people, I feel like these days who
That went to school for what you do.
yes, like I actually was like trained in this and like purposely like I didn't know when I went to college, like I didn't know going into college like that's what I wanted to do, but I was in a college of communications and this was one of the things that you could try and like one of the tracks, and I was like I don't really know what PR is about, but let me try it, and I ended up enjoying it the most. So I just kind of like stuck with that all through college. Like I declared that as my major. I had internships all throughout college in in the space, like whether in agencies and like in-house in other in within a brand. And by the time I graduated, I got a job in-house in a nonprofit, which was what I thought I was wanted to do. And it ended up not being a great situation. And so I ended up quitting pretty quickly. And I ended up calling up this guy who I had worked for. I had had one of my internships over in college and then had ended up working like part-time, I think over one of the summers or something since then, and had just stayed in really good touch. We had a great relationship. And I was like, do you have any work I can do? Because like I need to get out of this place. And he was like, well, I have a couple projects you could help me on. It was like not a full-time situation, but I was like, okay, it's better than what I'm doing now. And so I started doing that with him. And then it was kind of from there that my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, was like, you could like, why are you not just doing some of this like by yourself? Like it was a very small company. And so it was basically like me and him and the guy I was working for, not my boyfriend. But he was like, you could be doing this yourself and stop complaining about like, all the things you don't love about the way that like he was running his company. And
Yeah.
no, like honestly, we're still great friends. He's still one of my best friends to this day. And like we still work on things together sometimes when it makes sense if one of us needs help on a project. So not at all like bashing, but I was like, I wish like I just wanted to do things differently. I already had my own ideas. So my husband actually ended up like connecting me with someone he knew who was like opening a restaurant. And that was the space that we were in, restaurant PR at that time. So I just started working with a client at that point and then more and more from there until I had more of my own clients than than projects I was helping the other guy with. And that's when I was like, oh, I basically have my own business too. But it just came out of wanting to do things my own way, want like having a little more time on my hands than that I was like, I could do more projects myself. So basically I took on like small projects that were like too small to work with, at the more established company and started there. And he was like, he was fine with that. He was like, yeah, if it's not something I'm going to like work with, you can just do it yourself. Like, no problem. So it wasn't like conflict of interest or anything like that. But yeah, basically that was like how it happened. So there was no like big leap of like, oh, let me go out and start my own business or, going from I feel like people always have their story of like, I went from like my cushy corporate job to like took this leap to start my own business. And like, it was so scary. Mine wasn't like that. It was just like, what can I do to fill my time, make a little more
Mhm.
money? And then like eventually I just was doing my own thing. And then I realized like I really liked that. Like, and I liked like building the business too. At some point I realized that. So yeah, that's really like how that got going.
I love that. I think that what's so interesting about your journey is one, yes, you have the background and the knowledge and expertise from going to school, but it's also been one of those areas of growth where you've learned along the way and
Oh yeah.
made shifts and pivots along the way. And I think another thing to highlight here for everybody listening is the value in connections because you were able to really step into this business and create this business of your own by having these connections just naturally unfold. Can you speak to a little bit about like the beginning stages of getting those very early on clients and how that really worked? Was that more word of mouth? Was that through your own PR efforts? What did that look like?
Yeah, no, that's great. A great point. All great points. And I would say, like, first of all, yeah, the reason I was able to like start so early and quickly and like young, I think, was because I was, first of all, very niche down, which like I don't necessarily preach the power of the niche anymore because I actually ended up really not liking it. But the reason I was able to start my own thing so quickly was because as I like alluded to, we did restaurant PR. And so I knew every writer in the city. I knew all the media in the like food, restaurant, and business space from the experience I already had in college and working for this guy like before I even graduated. So I literally already had all the connections I needed from like a PR standpoint. I already knew exactly what to do. And that was partly because I had a very specific niche too. So then like, yes, my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, knew someone who was going to be opening a restaurant. So he was like, let me connect you with them. And they were like, they didn't even know what PR was, but because they like trusted him and he was like, yeah, no, you need this if you're opening a restaurant in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were like, sure, we'll take a meeting with her, right? And so yeah, it was totally all referral based at the beginning. It was all connections. So I started working with them. And again, it was like I didn't tell them like you're my first client ever on my own, but I also had a lot of experience. I could show them like these are the articles I've gotten for this last restaurant that I helped open. Like, and I had done that, through the other agency, but I had a proven track record of what I could do for them and how I had done it before. So it wasn't like out of the blue. Like it wasn't just like, oh, let me try doing this thing and like pay me for it. It was like I already had been doing it, just not like as my own business, as my own agency. So that was, I think, obviously very helpful. And because
Mhm.
I was so specific to the niche, it was like, this is what I do for restaurants. And they could see that and they were like, yeah, that's exactly what we need. So they were willing to give me a chance. And then I think the next two or three clients too also all came from people that I knew and
Mhm.
or a lot of it too is like then when you start doing that they know people and they know they
Yeah.
introduce you to other people. My business was solely referral based. It's kind of for a long time and it's kind of bad. I feel like I kind of like I shouldn't even say this, but like I didn't even think of like doing PR for myself. Like I didn't market myself
That's
like
how it goes. That's how it goes.
yeah. Well, and I think it like when your work can speak for itself and you are, it's very local based. And
Mhm.
I had my networks and I had those connections and those relationships. And I honestly it just kind of kept happening because it's such a specific industry too. Like not a lot of people, not everybody knows like someone who's really great at PR, who's like accessible, small business, could, set up a meeting and meet with someone the next day or the next week. Like, I think people think that PR is going to be a big agency, very expensive. It's going to be a
Mhm.
whole big thing. It's maybe inaccessible for them. So when someone like recommended that there was someone who was not like that, like I think have
Yeah.
been really receptive to getting together with me and seeing what it was all about and things like that. So it was like, I don't want to say it was easy to build, but like the first couple of clients just kind of came.
I love that. So before we dive too much further into this, because I have a million questions, but you mentioned something that I think is a good thing for us to highlight, and that is that not everybody knows what PR is. So will you tell us from like a very beginner level what PR is and how that's different maybe from like your average marketing or social media marketing?
Yes, I would love to. And so yeah, it's PR when I'm talking about PR and when most people are like, oh, I need a PR agency, we're talking about usually media relations, like a focus on media relations. So like if you see an article in a newspaper, a magazine, or even a segment on TV, there's someone who got that there. There's someone who connected that person or that brand or even just the idea of the story for whatever from wherever it was connected to the writer or the reporter or the editor who just or the producer who decides like to send a camera for the TV. So we're the ones who connect the brand with the media and kind of tell them here's what the story is and here's why you should want to cover it and we'll help facilitate like the interview or the material they need to put together the story or things like that. So it's not only just media these days. There are a lot of other pieces to it. And technically, it's any relationship with a public that has to do with the brand. So, it could be there's investor relations, there's internal relations or like customer relations, employee relations, maybe that's internal. There's all different like kind of pieces to it. So we're the ones who make those connections, who bring someone at the media outlet the story and say, here's why you should want to talk to so and so, or here's why you should want to cover this story on this great thing that's happening. And we make the story possible because otherwise they might not even know it exists. Like, the media person or the news person might not know this was even a thing that was happening that they should be talking about. Or if it's not like a hard news thing, it might be like an interview or a spotlight on a brand or a business. Um, they, wouldn't know to do it. So we're the ones who kind of go to them and pitch them the story idea. We pitch them the story and the material and give them everything they need to set that up. But these days, and that's really what it really was 12 years ago when I started. But these days, I honestly usually like to use the word visibility even more than PR or media relations these days because it is also interconnected now. And I will say, PR, it stands for public relations. It's any relations between a brand and it's Publix, anybody or any group who is like related to it in some way or who it needs to communicate with. So that could be investor relations or employee relations. It could be like internal. There's all different pieces of it technically, but usually when someone's like, I'm hiring a PR agency, that's because they want to be seen in the media more. And I will say now that has expanded. That can now sometimes include social media, which is not the same because you own those platforms. Usually, really, truly, the differentiation is that PR is media coverage or visibility that you're not paying for and you also don't own. So it's not advertising. If you have to send somebody a single dollar besides the PR company who's like doing it for you, it's an advertisement. Or like, these days they have a lot of like sponsored content or like partnership articles or partnership posts. Those are technically advertising because you're paying for it. The differentiation with PR is it's something where they could say, no, we're not going to cover that because we're not interested in the story, or we don't have space for it right now, or for whatever reason, they don't want to do it. You don't have control over that. And that's why you need a good PR person to actually get the placement. Whereas, like, if you're going to pay for something, they're going to put it in because you're paying for it.
The doors are officially open to the Creatrix Mastermind, and I am so excited to share this space with you. This mastermind experience is a space where you come to ignite your magic. It is a space where you come into community with women who are rising alongside you. And together we're creating lasting impact and meaningful work through your divinely led mission. When you step into this container with us, you're going to rise as the wildly wealthy woman you're meant to be. And you're going to do it with so much clarity and confidence in building something that has longevity, launching something that allows you to be fully in your unique power. The doors are opening in March 2025. This is a 12-month mastermind experience, and we are making this mastermind so accessible. If you're ready to ignite your magic, you can step into this container for as little as $385 per month or $4,200 for the entire year. If you join us with Early Bird, you're only going to pay $3,700 for the entire year, and you will be joining 10 other women. We're going to keep this space super limited because you will be getting direct, intimate support from not only me as your brand and marketing expert, but also Jennifer Greinier. You've heard her here on the podcast. She is the human design queen. She is the queen of boundaries, and she's going to help you with really finding that true alignment, stepping into your unique essence, and integrating that into your business so that you can really create the impact that you're here to create. We cannot wait to welcome you into the Creatrix Mastermind. If this is speaking to you, if you are an established entrepreneur and you know that valuing yourself, your mindset, and your business knowledge is going to bring you to the next level, if you're ready to immerse yourself in a supportive group of women who are calibrating to their absolute highest potential, and you're committed to taking bold action and creating quantum leaps in your business, now is your time. This is your invitation. The link is in the show notes. If you go to creatrixmastermind.com/enroll, you can join us today. We cannot wait to welcome you inside.
And people know the difference. People are like, oh, that's something you paid for. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this outlet thought the story was a great idea, like that they wanted to cover it, that they chose to give you this exposure. It was that you paid for it. And that has a little bit of a different kind of connotation to it because people get the difference between an advertisement and like earned editorial. So that's really what we focus on, is any earned visibility, and all the like pieces that touches, which again, these days can sometimes be things like social media or influencer partnerships, other collaborations, things like that are going to help raise your visibility for your brand.
I love that. Something that I always speak to in business is the power of collaborations, but I think PR really takes that a step further where yes, you can have those one-on-one collaborations with like-minded business owners or people in your industry within your niche, but to be able to broaden that to have media channels or articles published about you, it really sets you up for that brand positioning. So can you speak to the value of that a little bit on how that's helping you build authority and trustworthiness with your audience?
Great question. And I would say like, yeah, I think PR is almost like it was like the ultimate collaboration, right? Like probably the original like collaboration because like of course like newspapers existed from the like way back when. And then at some point people were like, hey, I could actually work with the writer to tell them to tell my story. And like that was like the ultimate collaboration. And I feel like it still kind of is, but now there's different ways you can do that. And people think of it as like collaborating with other brands or an influencer, things like that. But yeah, that's like you really can think about it that way. It's the ultimate collaboration of like, hey, let's get this story out there because it's great and people need to hear about it. People need to know. But the reason it's great for brands or for people, individuals, business owners, founders, is because it is also like the ultimate reputation builder. Like if you are featured in the media, like it's such good clout for you and
Yeah.
your brand. Because people are like, oh yeah, like they thought you were important enough to feature or interesting enough or insert whatever enough that like whatever your story is about, like they thought you were worthy of featuring. And like that's a big deal because there's so many options and it's not easy to get featured in them, and you have to have some reason that they wanted to like include you or cover you or interview you. So it's kind of also like what I tell people is I feel like we all are familiar with the idea of like the no like trust factor when it comes to marketing in general. And this is the reason I think that it has so much power is because people already know, like, and trust the media outlets that they follow so much. And when I say media outlets, like it could even be it could be a podcast. Like we do podcast pitching these days, especially like that's huge.
Mhm.
And it's like if somebody already listens to your podcast and they already like you and trust you and your opinions, and then you're having me on this podcast, it's basically you saying, hey, listen to her because she knows what she's talking about. I know she's got good stuff to share. Like all of those things that they already like come to you for is going to kind of transfer over onto me as the guest. And that's the same kind of thing. Like if somebody listens to it or, they read the New York Times because they trust it, right? And they like it, obviously, and they obviously know it. And then they read about you in there, it's like you've already got that know like and trust factor just because that transfers over from the outlet itself. So you're kind of gaining all of that even if it's the first time you've been in it. People already kind of have that know like and trust with the outlet, and so then they also have that with you. And so that's kind of where that clout and that like that's why it can be such a good reputation builder and brand builder, because like
Mhm.
people really kind of just absorb that from the outlet that they already trust, or like the editor or the writer that they already trust. So it's like when you look at an article and you're like, oh, this person like recommended I buy this product, you're going to go buy it because you already trust that they tell you about
Mhm.
good stuff, like that they're not going to say it was
Yeah.
good if it's, that's kind of where it comes from. And that way people will then seek you out and they're like, oh, let me look into this more. And they're already at that stage of looking into you more after just that one thing, like, reading the one article or hearing the one podcast episode. They're already at the stage of, oh, let me go look into what else she has going on or what else she has to offer. Whereas, like, if you had just come in contact with someone through like their own marketing channels or something, you might follow for a long time before you're like, oh yeah, let me actually see how I could get more
Mhm.
involved, because you don't know anything about them yet. You're building up that know, like, and trust factor from the very beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
We talk
totally.
about
I
that
think that's,
all day.
I love it. No, I think that that's a twofold benefit because one, you're getting a new audience right in front of you to be able to make that really powerful first impression based on whatever PR deal that you've landed. And you're then able to share that publication with your existing audience, let's say on social media, where they're then building up your reputation in their minds of, I already know, like, and trust this person, and here's another reason why I know, like, and trust this person, and can really confidently share them. You had mentioned podcast interviews and the value of those collaborations. For me, when I bring on a guest, one, I check in with the energetics of, does this person feel aligned for the podcast? But I also look at your reputation, what podcasts you've been on before, what media outlets you've been on before, your website, like all of those things are really speaking to the value of your brand overall. And if you're gaining that PR visibility, it's really going to, in my opinion, help with building
Mhm.
that reputation.
Yeah. And even like, sometimes people are like, well, I don't know if like anyone reads this certain outlet or whatever that there might be an opportunity in. And, or like, I don't know if my like audience is reading that or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? Yes, that can be hard to know. Like with PR, it can be hard to track. You don't necessarily know all the demographics of everything that you might want to pitch, but you also have to think about how else are you going to be able to use it. It's not just about that article and that article coming out the day it comes out in that publication. It's how else can you use that content in so many different ways in your own
Mhm.
owned marketing that you can showcase. Here's where I was featured here, and you can use different pieces of it in different, so many different ways to help people along that customer journey or that perspective journey. And also you have to think about how people are like, that's going to live online forever. How are people, if they're maybe looking into a couple of different options for something you offer, they might be Googling you and looking you up. How are you going to be differentiated against the other people who might be somewhat similar? If there are articles that come up for you when someone Googles you, even if like that person was never going to come across that outlet itself and read the article normally, that's going to come up now when you're Googled and people are going to see that. And not only is it just the immediate cloud of like, oh, she's been like featured in these like articles, that's she clearly knows what she's talking about, right? She's already seen as more of an expert than the other person who maybe it hasn't been featured in articles, but also they can get to know you more. Like if you click into that article, even if it's just because they were seeking you out at that stage and it's someone who's considering hiring you, they're going to get to learn something different about you probably than what they've seen somewhere else. And or they're going to see the story told in a different way, or an interview where you got to go into different pieces of whatever it is, and so they're going to learn a lot more about you and your brand in those instances than what they're going to necessarily see on like your social media or even your website. Like it's just a chance for people to get to like dive in a little bit more and build that relationship with you before they've ever even reached out to you potentially, or after they have, but now they're like doing their research, and it's going to help you kind of stand out there if somebody's thinking about hiring you. So I think about it in that way too. It's like part of the actual prospective client process or the research someone's going to do before buying your product, and it helps in all of those ways along that journey too.
I love that. There's so many benefits and so much incentive for people to be at least exploring the idea of PR. So for anybody listening that maybe hasn't dabbled in this at all, or they've never even heard of it, or they're maybe thinking they need support in PR, what are some of those first steps, or even like pre-qualifications for somebody in their business or with their brand to be able to say, okay, I'm ready to start looking into PR. What do they need to have before they reach out to somebody like you to get that support?
Yeah, I think you need to just make sure you feel ready for it. A lot of it is mindset. A lot of people come to me and they think that they are ready, and then they're like, there's something kind of holding them back. So a lot of it is mindset. A lot of it really is like, are you ready to put yourself out there? Are you prepared to, I sometimes people come to me and they're like, well, like I want to, I know I need to promote my business through PR, but like I don't want to be the face of the brand, or like I don't want you to use my picture, or I don't want to be the one doing the interviews. And unless you have like another spokesperson for, your brand is big enough that you have a spokesperson or someone else who can be that person, like that's going to be really tough. You're just not going to get the opportunities. And if you do, they're also not going to be as strong, because people do pick up on your energy, like whether even if it's in
Mhm.
an actual spoken interview like this, or if it's a written interview, or even some kind of article like that, the writer is going to write about your brand, but they're going to have to talk to you to write about it. That all comes through, and it really does show. So part of it that, but also make sure you feel ready in terms of like, could you bring on more clients right now, or do you have enough product to sell more if you do get, some kind of big showcase, some kind of article or something like that? Like, can you actually handle it? And you just want to be prepared for that, because you're not necessarily that you're going to get like a huge influx right away. And it's not that you have to be able to service everyone, right? You could have a good system for like, here's how my wait list works, or, something like that. But just so that you're not like, I'm gonna, you don't want to lose all those leads because you aren't
Mhm.
prepared. Um, and I have had that. I have had, brands come in, but then they're like, oh, but we wouldn't be able to up production enough to cover the things that they want. They're like, we want to be on like Good Morning America, but like, can you actually like, do you have things prepared that you would be able to keep
Right.
up with that if you get that influx of sales in one day? So thinking about things like that, but also like I think from a small business perspective, you should have your branding looking pretty good. Like people are, so when you're going to pitch yourself to be even on a podcast, like as you said, like as the host, you look into things. You want to make sure you have a great headshot so that you can promote the episode when it comes out, right? You want to make sure that there's a good website so that it, at least that it looks, legitimate and professional, and that there's enough information that like you could link to it and people can find out more information and things like that. So I do tell people to have at the bare minimum like basically your good branding, good information, some kind of next step, whether that is like buy a product or sign up for a thing or book a call. Like you want there to be some kind of next step that somebody can do if they were interested in coming into your world more. But basically put together a little bio so you can explain who you are, a little blurb about what your brand and business is, and then start thinking about what is your actual pitch. So the first real step, like once you're sure you have all of those things in place, is thinking about what is that thing? What is like your differentiator? What is your story? What is that thing you want to start being known for? And then putting together a pitch that you can use to go out to, the podcast hosts that you admire or a writer who writes for an outlet that you think would be great to be featured in. And there are a lot of kind of easier ways to get started, right? Like you can reach out to a friend, who has their own podcast, or there are some outlets where you can submit like a questionnaire for like a written Q&A kind of thing and get an interview printed through something like that. Like it's not always Good Morning America. And I do encourage people, like there are a lot of places you can start, even if you're brand new or like have never done it before, don't even really understand what PR is. So I do like to, it's not easy, but I like to mention that there are some like easier ways to get started if you're interested.
Awesome. Do you have any, as we're on the topic, do you have any resources for people that are maybe in those DIY stages, or they're not entirely sure if they're ready to commit to reaching out to the bigger platforms, but they want these features and publications where they can just submit something like a questionnaire?
Yeah, I will say I have, people can listen to my podcast. I can plug that because I share a
Yes,
lot
plug your podcast for sure.
tips and information and kind of like DIY kind of episodes on there. So people can find Quotable, the Female Entrepreneur Podcast. That's my podcast. And I do interviews with guests too. But the solo episodes, I usually talk more about like doing PR for your business, PR and marketing and business building. But there's a lot of DIY PR focused episodes. And I do have some resources on my website too. But the one other thing that I would say, and wait, I'm trying to remember. I can make sure it's up there before this goes out, but because I know I used to have some kind of freebie of like, I can't remember, certain place, like X places to pitch right now that you can like kind of like pitch and submit yourself for.
Mhm.
So I can look for that and make sure that that's somewhere that we could link to. But also I will say, as I mentioned at the beginning, we publish Quotable Magazine, and we have one of those forms right up on our website where we do a female founder spotlight series. And that's a form you can fill out right on the website. And that's a great place to start if you want to just get something up there, see what it feels like to have your story told in print and have some content that you can then share on your social media, send out to your email list, like, hey, I was featured here, that kind of stuff to start getting that going. We actually have two series of that. We have a day in the life series for female founders as well. So people can submit to that. I like to make easy ways to get started, and that's one of them.
That's amazing. Okay, I have one more question that I wanted to cover on this episode. We'll make sure to put all of the links in the show notes for everything that you're mentioning, so that people can easily grab those. But you had mentioned um, the role of being a thought leader and how to really step into that version of yourself and position yourself. Can you speak to a little bit about what that means and how to really start doing that so that when you do feel like you're ready for PR and you're ready to take some of these steps or hire a PR agency, your mindset is in that place to be able to do that?
Yeah. Well, and I think like, if you have your business and you've been doing this and you have worked with clients or whatever that looks like you should be trying to position yourself as a thought leader. And like I don't want to be like deterring people too. Like it's not like you have to have like all these things in place. Like if you're an expert in your field, if you're helping people do it, I'm sure. Like if you're helping people with whatever it is that you help people, if you're a service provider or even a product-based business or anything like that. So you should be seen as a thought leader. And again, yeah, part of that is the mindset. And a lot of it is really just going back to taking a little bit of time to figure out what is, maybe you're an expert in this field, but what is like the one thing you do really want to be known for? Kind of as I mentioned before, like what is it that differentiates you and the way that you think or talk about this thing? And just digging deep on that so that you're really confident on that and coming up with like, here, what are your talking points on that topic? Like, because to be a thought leader, right, you have to have some thoughts that are really, you're honed in on those thoughts. They're different than what other people are saying. Not that it has to be something totally different. You don't have to be like, oh, everyone's saying this, so I say this, right? But it's like, what is your kind of unique take on it? What are the nuances that you bring to the table? And a lot of that can be like, I think people get tripped up on that too, because it's not like it has to be something so like out of the blue that no one else has ever talked about it before, right? But it's what is like the unique piece that you bring to it, probably because of your background or the types of clients that you work with, or just the experiences that you've had that like allow you to kind of bring a little bit of a different lens to the table, to the story. I don't know, that's not like a phrase, but
Yeah.
a little different take to
No.
the story, and really getting clear on what that is, and then really figuring out how you can start getting that out there as much as possible. Because a lot of it is kind of like, I hate to say like repetition, but like to be known as a thought leader means you're known for these thoughts, right? And so you can't be putting out there like 5 different things, 10 different things. You want to really hone in on like the one main thing that you want to be known for as a thought leader for now, right? It's not that you can never talk about other stuff, but like for for 6 months, what is that one thing you want to be known for? How are the ways you're going to kind of talk about it? And then start thinking about honestly how you can be starting to put those out on your own channels first, so that once you then try to pitch like an article or an interview or some, to speak on a stage, it makes sense because again, they're going to come back and check your stuff first. How are you making, putting up videos on your own Instagram page? How do you have stuff on your website that speaks to this topic and the fact that you speak to it? So like that might even be having a page on your website of how to hire you to be a speaker, even if you've never spoken on a
Mhm.
stage yet before. But it's like
Yeah.
showing that you're open to that you can do that, that you are doing that, even if like maybe you haven't done it yet, so that when you do pitch it, people come and they see like, oh yeah, this is like a thing. Like I can book her to do this, and like not to lie and make it seem like you've done it if you haven't. Like I'm not saying like have examples of like stages you haven't spoken on, but make sure they see this is something that you're open to doing. And that all helps to show that, you are a thought leader and that this is something that you can really speak to. So those are some of the things to get started, I think, but it's also just having a clear strategy on how the things are all going to work together too, because being seen as a thought leader, it's kind of a snowball effect, right? Like you have to like really be out there a lot. You have to be seen out there. Everything needs to be working together. Like you need to again like be showcasing it on your social media, but also getting out to events and talking about it. Like even if you're not on the stage at the event, getting out in front of people and talking about it, and then showing, what you're doing in all the ways and places that you can, and then starting to pitch yourself to actually be on bigger platforms talking about these things. So that's kind of the quick overview of how I would start.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like we could talk about this all day, but the PR aspect and your expertise ties in so beautifully with what I do with branding and setting people up to really have that message and that authentic positioning that shares their journey, showcases their unique expertise, and allows them to show up confidently. And I think that those are some of those foundational pieces that you're speaking to of like, yes, you want to be able to know your 3 topics, you want to be able to showcase things from a visual perspective on your website. But at the end of the day, you have to have that foundation to stand on from a branding perspective to be able to build onto those things.
Right. And like I'm sure the people you work with, they're already there, right? Because they already
Yeah.
have these things. They've worked with you. Like I definitely work with people who sometimes haven't necessarily done that foundational work
Yes, I'm sure.
before. But yeah, once you've got that stuff down, it's mostly, yeah, the things that I've said are the things that you'll have already done if you've really nailed down your brand well and you've worked with
Mhm.
someone like you. So yeah, and I love that I use the same like magnetic, like that's what I use as like a way to describe it too, because you're drawing in people without having to go after them, because they're seeing you, and the things that they're seeing and learning about you are making them want to come seek you out, rather than you having to do paid ads or spend all this time doing the proactive outreach to them. They're coming to you, and that's like what we all want, I feel like. And that's, yeah, I think what's really aligned about it all. But the beauty of PR is that it's just getting you in front of much wider audiences without you having to like spend any money on ads or things like that. It's bringing in, a way bigger audience for that top of the funnel. And then all of the branding that you have in place, the rest of your marketing plan, all of your processes have something to work with because they have all those people who are checking you out and they already like you and trust you from what they've seen or heard or read about you. And it just makes it all work a
Yeah,
lot better.
totally. Yes, I think that this is super exciting for our listeners. I know that I get really excited about the different ways that people can hone in on their brand and then share that in a way that feels really genuine and doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel salesy. This is more so just building longevity and sustainability in your business. Like you said, these articles and these features are something that lasts longer than a social media post that maybe has a 24-hour lifespan. So there's so much potential in that. And I really appreciate this conversation. We will put all of your links in the show notes, but will you tell everybody where you want them to kind of take that first step with you or get to know you better? I know you mentioned your podcast. What is the best way for people to connect?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely love for people to go check out the podcast, Quotable Female Millennial. I mean, oh my gosh, I used to that's funny. I renamed it like years ago and I've never said that by accident.
Oh, funny.
Quotable, a female entrepreneur podcast. Used to be called a female millennial entrepreneur podcast. Then I dropped that. If anyone caught that. And yeah, you can find me. I have sort of recently started a personal Instagram account. So you can find me at I am Pollina. I'm try to get better there. But you can also check out Quotable Media Co on Instagram, which is my original and agency account. And then you can go to quotablemediaco.com for all the things, including that's also where you can find like the magazine. And if you click the magazine tab, you can find all of that. But definitely feel free to connect in any of those places, and I'll definitely love to hear from you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alessandra. I appreciate your insights, your wisdom, and sharing your journey with us.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you are listening so you never miss a beat. For episode show notes, visit calandramartin.com/podcast. Your iTunes reviews and your sharing of the show helps us reach more magnetic bosses just like you. Until next time.